The room hummed with energy, a low, persistent thrum generated by the collective anxiety of hundreds of students, some with fur, others with scales, and a few that defied easy description. At the center of it all sat Zilker, a Zorathian with glistening crimson skin and a cranial ridge that pulsed faintly with bioelectric light. His four eyes darted toward the human, Sam Carter, sitting at the next desk. Humans. Primitive creatures with their fleshy, two-eyed faces and over-reliance on luck. How such a species had even qualified for the Intergalactic Academy baffled him. Yet there Sam was, calm as a nebula, scribbling notes on what looked like paper. Zilker's sneer was involuntary. Paper, in an institution where neural uplinks and holographic interfaces were standard, was like seeing someone carve equations into stone tablets. The instructor, a floating crystalline entity named Professor Clitheris, floated into the room. Students, it announced in a voice that reverberated in the skull, today you will face the Advanced Computational Sciences exam. This test is designed to challenge not only your intellect but also your problem-solving instincts. You may begin. A holographic countdown appeared in the air, 3 hours. The exam had started. Zilker pressed a finger to his temple, activating his neural uplink. Instantly, streams of data cascaded across his vision, the questions unfolding like digital puzzles. His fingers hovered over a holographic interface, ready to execute precise algorithms. It would be easy, an hour, maybe 2 at most, to solve everything. Zorathians were bred for intellectual efficiency, and Zilker prided himself on his flawless academic record. He glanced at Sam again, expecting the human to fumble with some outdated calculator or struggle with the interface. Instead, Sam was scribbling furiously on his paper with, was that a pencil? Zilker's 4 eyes narrowed in disbelief. The human wasn't even using a computational device. Fascinated despite himself, Zilker opened a covert channel through his neural uplink. Academy rules forbade accessing another student's answers, but Zilker had hacked into systems far more sophisticated than this before. He justified it as curiosity, not cheating. What could the human possibly be working on without tools? The neural link connected, and suddenly, Zilker was inside Sam's mind. Or rather, he was trying to be. Chaos. Absolute chaos. Numbers danced erratically alongside fragmented images of Earth landscapes, snatches of music, and something that looked suspiciously like a sandwich. There were no precise calculations, no neatly ordered algorithms, just an incoherent mess of thoughts swirling together. What is this madness? Zilker thought, trying to parse the strange signals. He dug deeper, seeking clarity, but the images only grew stranger, squares multiplying into cubes, then morphing into abstract shapes that seemed more art than math. And yet, answers were emerging. Zilker could see the human solutions forming as if by magic. Correct solutions. Frustration built in Zilker's chest. How could the human possibly arrive at these answers without logical progression? He scanned the holographic display of his own work. His algorithms were flawless, but they took time to execute. Sam's approach, whatever it was, seemed instantaneous. The minutes ticked by, and Zilker's focus faltered. He found himself distracted, trying to mimic the human's erratic thought patterns. His own answers slowed as he struggled to adapt, his usual efficiency reduced to a crawl. By the halfway mark, Zilker realized he had a problem. He wasn't ahead. He wasn't even on pace to finish. Sam, on the other hand, flipped his paper over and started doodling in the margins. He was done. Panic gripped Zilker. He'd underestimated the human, misunderstood him entirely. This wasn't luck, nor was it primitive desperation. It was something else, something raw and unquantifiable. As the countdown reached the final seconds, Zilker closed the neural link and stared at his unfinished work. For the first time in his academic career, he felt something wholly unfamiliar. Doubt. The timer buzzed, signaling the end of the exam. Sam leaned back in his chair, stretched, and glanced over at Zilker with a small, knowing smile. "Good luck with that," he said, and walked out of the room. Zilker paced the dimly lit corridors of the Intergalactic Academy, his mind racing with questions that refused to resolve themselves. The human, Sam Carter, had completed the exam without a calculator, neural uplink, or even a basic hollow interface. And yet, the answers in his chaotic mental stream had been not only correct but shockingly efficient. The Zorathian's pride stung like a venomous thorn. How could a species so reliant on basic tools and outdated methods outperform a being like him? For Zilker, it wasn't just an anomaly, it was a threat to his sense of superiority. Back in his dormitory pod, he replayed the fragments of Sam's mental processes he'd captured during the exam. The chaotic swirl of images, the strange associations between seemingly unrelated concepts, it all defied logic. Encryption, Zilker muttered to himself, pacing in circles. It has to be a crude but effective algorithm to disguise raw computations. That had to be the answer. Humans couldn't possibly outperform Zorathians at intellectual tasks. There was some hidden trick he'd missed. Determined to expose it, Zilker activated his neural uplink and accessed the Academy's archive. He searched for data on human cognition, a subject he'd previously dismissed as irrelevant. What he found, however, left him even more confused. Humans, it seemed, didn't think linearly like most species. Their brains were optimized for pattern recognition, creative problem solving, and intuitive leaps. They didn't just calculate, they improvised. Zilker snorted in disbelief. Improvisation is chaos, he muttered. A dangerous inefficiency. Still, he couldn't deny the evidence. Sam's answers in the exam hadn't followed logical algorithms, yet they had been undeniably accurate. There was something inhumanly efficient about the human's inefficiency. The next morning, Zilker's curiosity led him to the Academy's central atrium, where Sam was seated at a small table with a stack of papers and a mechanical pencil. Zilker watched from a distance, his four eyes narrowing as Sam worked. The human's lips moved silently as he scribbled, occasionally pausing to scratch his head or make strange gestures with his hands. Finally, unable to contain himself, Zilker approached. "You're using paper," he said, his voice laced with incredulity. "And a pencil?" Sam looked up, grinning. "Last I checked, yeah." "You're observant." Zilker folded his arms. "You are aware that the Academy provides holographic interfaces for calculations?" "Sure," Sam said, leaning back. "But I like doing things my way." "Your way," Zilker repeated, as if the words were a sour fruit. "Primitive methods. Inefficient." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Inefficient? You mean like spending hours designing algorithms that are overcomplicated for the problem?" Zilker stiffened. "Zorathian methods are precise and effective." "Sure, for Zorathians," Sam said, shrugging. "But we humans? We've had to figure out how to make do with less. Sometimes, the simplest approach is the fastest." Zilker's eyes narrowed. "Then explain your methods. How did you solve the equations so quickly?" Sam tapped his pencil against the table. "It's not something you explain. It's something you practice." He gestured to the papers scattered before him. "You learn patterns, shortcuts. You figure out ways to simplify problems in your head instead of overcomplicating them." Zilker stared at the papers. The symbols looked familiar, but the way they were arranged felt alien. He couldn't see the logic, just scattered calculations and annotated notes that seemed to follow no discernible order. "This is chaos," Zilker said, pointing at the pages. "It doesn't make sense." "It's not supposed to at first," Sam said with a grin. "It's just how we think." For the first time, Zilker felt an inkling of doubt in his own methods. He'd always believed in the superiority of Zorathian logic, but Sam's unorthodox approach had achieved results he couldn't ignore. The human leaned forward, meeting Zilker's gaze. "You want to understand it? You're gonna have to unlearn everything you think you know." Zilker bristled at the suggestion but said nothing. For now, he would watch, study, and decode this enigma of human ingenuity. Zilker had never experienced frustration like this. The more he observed Sam's methods, the less sense they made. For days, he watched the human scribble on paper, mutter equations under his breath, and somehow produce answers to problems that baffled even Zorathian neural processors. It wasn't just illogical, it was infuriating. By the time the next exam loomed on the schedule, Zilker was determined to expose what he still believed was a trick. He cornered Sam in the Academy Library, a sprawling, multi-level space where holographic books floated in midair, shifting to accommodate any species' reading preferences. Sam sat at a table with his ever-present pencil, calmly jotting notes while others worked with holographic interfaces. "Explain yourself," Zilker demanded, his 4 eyes fixed on the human. Sam looked up, unsurprised. "Explain what?" "Your unorthodox methods," Zilker said, struggling to keep the irritation out of his voice. "You defy every logical principle, yet you succeed. Are you concealing a neural enhancement? A hidden computational device?" Sam laughed, the sound echoing in the library. "I'm not hiding anything, Zilker. It's just how we humans roll." "Rolling is not a method," Zilker snapped. "It is random chance masquerading as intelligence." Sam put down his pencil, giving Zilker his full attention. "You really think I'm just guessing, don't you?" "Your results suggest otherwise," Zilker admitted grudgingly. "But your process defies logic." "That's because you're stuck thinking in straight lines," Sam said, leaning back in his chair. "You Zorathians are amazing at linear thinking, following a set process step by step until you get the answer. But humans? We've had to adapt. We look for shortcuts, patterns, ways to simplify problems instead of brute forcing them." "Shortcuts are imprecise," Zilker said, his tone dismissive. "Not if you know what you're doing," Sam countered. He picked up his pencil and flipped to a blank page in his notebook. "Here, let me show you." Zilker hesitated, his pride warring with his curiosity. Finally, he sat across from Sam, his arms crossed. "Proceed." Sam sketched a problem on the page, a complex equation with variables and exponents that would typically require a neural processor to solve efficiently. "How would you approach this?" Zilker activated his neural uplink, scanning the equation. "I would input it into the interface, which would calculate the solution through iterative algorithms." "Right," Sam said, nodding. "But here's the thing. You're relying on the processor to brute force every possible solution." "Me? I'm looking for patterns." Sam began scribbling again, breaking the equation into smaller parts. He circled terms, crossed others out, and made connections that seemed nonsensical to Zilker. But within moments, Sam had an answer. "There. Done." Zilker analyzed the result. It was correct. "How?" "It's all about intuition," Sam said, tapping his temple. "Humans are good at spotting patterns and taking educated guesses. We don't need to calculate every possibility if we can see the likely solution." Zilker frowned, his mind racing. "This intuition. Can it be learned?" Sam smiled. "It's less about learning and more about unlearning. You have to let go of needing everything to make sense right away. Start with the basics, build your instincts, and trust the process." Zilker stared at the equation, then back at Sam. For the first time, he considered the possibility that human ingenuity wasn't a fluke. It was something entirely alien to Zorathian logic, and maybe even superior in its own way. "Very well," Zilker said slowly. "Teach me." Sam grinned. "All right. But fair warning, it's gonna hurt your brain at first." Zilker leaned forward, ready to dismantle everything he thought he knew. For the first time in his life, he was about to embrace the chaos. The days that followed tested Zilker's patience like nothing ever had. Sitting beside Sam Carter in the Academy's study atrium, he attempted to replicate the human's chaotic methods. The sprawling space, usually buzzing with the quiet hum of holographic interfaces and hushed conversations, now felt like an arena where his intellect was being dismantled piece by piece. "All right, try this one," Sam said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table. On it was a particularly thorny equation involving multiple variables, exponents, and logarithms. Zilker stared at it, his 4 eyes narrowing. His first instinct was to reach for his neural uplink, but Sam's voice cut through the temptation. "No shortcuts. Remember, trust your brain." Zilker grimaced but picked up the pencil, a clumsy, primitive tool in his hand. He began to write, trying to mimic the human's process. Numbers and symbols spilled onto the page, but they felt wrong, disconnected. "This is madness," Zilker growled, tossing the pencil down. "Your methods lack order." They reject precision. They're not rejecting precision, Sam countered. They're just approaching it differently. Look, you're overthinking it. Stop trying to brute force your way through. Then how do you expect me to solve it? Zilker demanded, his frustration evident. By breaking it down, Sam said, pointing at the equation. Look at this term. Does it remind you of anything? A simpler equation you've seen before? Zilker hesitated. He examined the term Sam had circled. It did resemble a basic logarithmic identity, but the connection felt tenuous. Possibly, he admitted reluctantly. Good, Sam said. That's the key. Start with what you know. Build from there. Zilker picked up the pencil again, his movements hesitant. He simplified the term as Sam suggested, then moved to the next part of the equation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the chaos began to make sense. Patterns emerged, and the solution felt within reach, not through brute calculation, but through a series of leaps and connections he hadn't thought possible. When he finished, Sam leaned over to check his work. Not bad, he said, grinning. You're getting it. Zilker stared at the paper, a mix of triumph and disbelief coursing through him. He'd solved the equation, and not through his usual meticulous methods. Instead, he'd relied on intuition, on patterns. But the victory felt hollow. This process, he said slowly, it feels inefficient. It requires guesswork. Sam chuckled. It's not guesswork if you're trained. That's the thing, humans grow up learning to take risks, to trust their instincts. Sure, it's messy, but it works. Zilker considered this, his pride warring with the undeniable results. It is unconventional, he conceded. But effective. Sam leaned back, stretching. And that's just one trick. There are a dozen more I could show you. We've got shortcuts for shortcuts. Zilker's four eyes narrowed. How is it that humans develop such methods when your technology is so rudimentary? Sam shrugged. When you don't have fancy tools, you learn to work with what you've got. Necessity breeds creativity. You should try it sometime. The word stung more than Zilker cared to admit. For his entire life, he'd relied on the superiority of Zorathian technology and logic. But now, sitting across from a human armed with nothing more than a pencil and paper, he felt the foundation of his beliefs shifting. The atrium's holographic clock chimed softly, signaling the end of the study period. Sam gathered his papers and stood. Same time tomorrow? Zilker hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. As Sam walked away, Zilker remained seated, staring at the equation he'd solved. For the first time, he didn't feel like a student at the top of his class. He felt like a novice standing on the brink of a vast, untapped frontier of thought, a frontier that humans had somehow mastered. And he was determined to master it too. The Academy's Great Hall was abuzz with anticipation as students from across the galaxy prepared for the high-stakes team competition. The air shimmered with holographic displays, each projecting a countdown to the start of the challenge. Zilker stood near the front, his crimson skin glowing faintly under the hall's bioluminescent lighting. His usual confidence had been replaced with a simmering mix of excitement and apprehension. Sam Carter strolled up beside him, a relaxed grin on his face. Ready for this? He asked, slipping a pencil into his shirt pocket. The gesture, simple and human, struck Zilker as absurdly casual considering the magnitude of the event. I am prepared, Zilker replied stiffly. Though I remain skeptical of your methods. Don't worry, Sam said, clapping him on the shoulder. You'll see. Trusting your gut doesn't mean ignoring your brain, it means letting them work together. Before Zilker could respond, Professor Clitheris, the crystalline overseer of the Academy, floated to the center of the hall. Its multifaceted surface refracted light into a cascade of colors as it addressed the assembly. Students, it intoned, its voice vibrating in their chests, today's challenge will test not only your knowledge but your ability to innovate under pressure. You will work in pairs to solve a series of escalating problems. Devices are prohibited. Only your minds and your teamwork will determine your success. A murmur rippled through the room. No devices? For many species, including Zilker's, this restriction was akin to asking them to solve problems blindfolded. He glanced at Sam, who looked unfazed, even pleased. Perfect, Sam said. This'll level the playing field. Zilker frowned. For you, perhaps. The students were assigned their stations, each equipped with a single sheet of paper and a pencil. The first problem materialized in glowing text above their desks. It was a relatively straightforward calculation involving orbital mechanics. Zilker's instincts urged him to think linearly, but Sam immediately started sketching a diagram, breaking the problem into smaller parts. Here, Sam said, sliding the paper toward Zilker. See how the components fit together? Zilker examined the drawing. Sam had simplified the problem into manageable pieces, bypassing the need for complex algorithms. Following Sam's lead, Zilker contributed his own insights, and within minutes, they'd completed the first problem. As the competition progressed, the challenges grew increasingly complex. Other teams faltered, their dependency on neural uplinks leaving them ill-prepared for manual problem-solving. But Sam and Zilker found a rhythm. Sam's intuitive leaps paired with Zilker's analytical precision created a synergy neither had anticipated. By the final round, only a handful of teams remained. The last problem appeared, a mind-bending puzzle involving interdimensional physics. Zilker's 4 eyes scanned the text, his mind racing. The problem was unlike anything he'd seen before, and his instincts screamed to break it into neat, logical pieces. Wait, Sam said, his voice calm but urgent. Look here, this part. It's not about solving the whole thing at once. We need to isolate the variables and work backward. Zilker hesitated, but Sam's conviction was infectious. Together, they dissected the problem, using a combination of Sam's pattern recognition and Zilker's precision. The final breakthrough came when Zilker abandoned his rigid thinking, applying a shortcut Sam had taught him. Got it, Zilker said, his voice laced with triumph. He wrote down the answer just as the timer buzzed. The hall fell silent as the results were tallied. Professor Clitheris floated to the front, its crystalline form shimmering. The winning team is, it paused dramatically. Sam Carter and Zilker of Zoreth. The room erupted into applause, but Zilker barely noticed. For the first time, victory didn't feel like a validation of his intellect alone. It felt like proof that embracing the unfamiliar, trusting in another's perspective, could lead to something greater. Sam turned to him, grinning. Told you we'd make a good team. Zilker allowed himself a rare smile. Perhaps there is merit in your chaos after all. The applause still echoed in Zilker's ears as he stood with Sam on the stage, holding their certificates of distinction. Around them, students from every corner of the galaxy watched with a mix of admiration and disbelief. For many, the idea of a Zorathian working alongside a human, let alone succeeding with such unconventional methods, was almost unthinkable. As the crowd dispersed and the evening's celebrations began, Zilker found himself lingering by the holographic fountains in the Academy's central plaza. The cascading light patterns reflected off his crimson skin, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every step of the final challenge. Sam strolled up beside him, munching on a small triangular food item he called pizza. Not celebrating? Sam asked, offering Zilker a slice. Zilker waved it away. I do not yet understand how we succeeded. Sam grinned. We solved the problems, didn't we? What's there to understand? Everything, Zilker said, his tone sharp. Your methods are unpredictable, chaotic. Yet they achieve results that defy Zorathian logic. It unsettles me. Sam chuckled and leaned against the glowing pillar. That's because you're still thinking in absolutes. Logic is great, it's gotten your people pretty far. But sometimes, life throws you problems that logic can't solve. That's where creativity comes in. Creativity, Zilker repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. You mean the ability to approach a problem irrationally? Sam laughed. Not irrationally, differently. Logic is like a straight line, right? Efficient, but it only gets you so far. Creativity lets you see the whole map, all the twists and turns you might miss if you're just following one path. Zilker mulled this over, the crystalline fountains casting shifting patterns of light across his thoughtful face. Your perspective has merit, he admitted slowly. But it is unsettling to abandon the precision of logic. You don't have to abandon it, Sam said, clapping him on the shoulder. Blend it. Use logic where it works, but don't be afraid to step off the path when you need to. Trust me, some of the best discoveries come from detours. The following weeks marked a shift in Zilker's academic approach. At first, he tried to emulate Sam's chaotic methods exactly, but he soon realized that wasn't the key. Instead, he began integrating small elements of human intuition into his own process, breaking problems into chunks, looking for patterns, and even allowing himself to make educated guesses. The results were transformative. In his next solo exam, Zilker not only finished faster than ever but also achieved a perfect score. More importantly, the experience felt different. Liberating. For the first time, he understood the thrill Sam found in solving problems creatively. Word of Zilker's shift spread quickly. Other students, intrigued by his success, began experimenting with human methods. Sam became something of an informal mentor, hosting impromptu study sessions in the atrium. At first, it was just a handful of curious individuals, but soon students from across the galaxy joined, eager to learn what humanity's primitive ways could offer. By the end of the term, Zilker found himself standing before a packed lecture hall, presenting his findings to the Academy faculty. His presentation, titled The Art of Thinking Beyond the Calculator, detailed how combining Zorathian precision with human creativity could unlock new dimensions of problem solving. Logic is a powerful tool, Zilker concluded, his voice steady. But it is not the only one. True mastery lies in the ability to adapt, to think beyond the constraints of a single system. Humanity has shown me this, and for that, I am grateful. The hall erupted into applause, but this time, Zilker didn't feel the rush of solitary triumph. Instead, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of connection to something greater than himself. As he stepped down from the podium, Sam met him at the base of the stage, grinning. Not bad for a guy who used to think paper was barbaric. Zilker allowed himself a rare smile. Not bad for a species that once thought the wheel was revolutionary. They walked out together, their friendship now as unshakable as the lessons they'd learned. The stars above the Academy seemed brighter that night, a testament to the limitless possibilities that arose when two minds, alien and human, dared to think beyond the boundaries of their own worlds.